Yes, we are. Good morning, everyone. This is Thursday, March 5th, 2020. This is a regularly scheduled meeting, no work session. Seal's here. Good morning, Seal. Of the Fort Myers Beach Town Council. All council members are present, town attorney, town clerk, and town manager. And it is 9 a.m. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Michelle, I know we don't do invocations at work sessions, but I just want to thank you for always doing such thoughtful invocations. You've just been wonderful with that, so thank you.
Agreed.
Yeah.
They're very good.
Yeah. Okay, so items for discussion this morning. The first one is a text amendment to the Land Development Code, sections 34-638 and 34-631, table 34-3, figure 34-1-8, and we have our LPA recommendations in the packet. Sarah, do you want to start this conversation? Hair's different again today. I love it.
Keep it guessing. So this discussion is really on. Okay, there we go.
It is, but you know what? Could I just tell people, everybody who's watching this at home, I would welcome your comments about the microphones. I know you're going to tell me anyway, but we're just sort of fleshing this out. Hopefully, they've tweaked it a little bit today, and we have better response. So thank you. Go ahead, Sarah.
Good morning, Sarah Probst, Community Development. So the items that you have before you today regarding the height, setback, and porches on fronts of houses are all from conversations that we had at a joint session and then conversations with the LPA. What I have for you today, we have a recommendation for an increased side setback for lots. At LPA, they decided that a 55-foot wide lot should have the increased setback of 10 feet. Jason and I have discussed this with some builders, and it may be a wider lot that works for, maybe 65 feet rather than 55 feet. But those are, options for you guys to discuss. The other item that we've discussed regarding setbacks is about porches. Currently, a porch is permitted to encroach 10 feet into the right-of-way setback, and there's no limitation on layers of that. So you end up with, I put some pictures of homes in there that have the double layer porches where you're essentially just giving 10 additional feet for the front of the house. It doesn't end up looking like an architectural feature, it's just an increase in where the house is located in appearance.
Why do you say that's not an architectural?
Well, it's an architectural feature, but it's not really treated in the way that it was written into the code originally. Originally, the idea was to have front porches, and people sat on the front porches and talked to their neighbors.
Yeah, but that was originally before FEMA, and that was when people had little ranch houses.
So because of the increased height that people are required to build at, they now have their porches up off the ground, and so the concept was, well, the question is, do you want 2 layers of porches with a roof over, or do you only want to have 1 layer porch so the entire front of the house doesn't encroach that additional 10 feet? It's a preference. We'd heard that people were not happy with the porches encroaching multiple layers on the front, so we gave you the option to change our definition of porch. I've included text in there to define that as a single story. And to just clarify what a balcony is, because it was not terribly clear in our code. So that would eliminate the 2-layer porches encroaching 10 feet into the front setback.
So what you would have as a result is a porch and a balcony.
You would have a porch, and then a balcony would be an option.
Right, I mean, you could. But to me, I think those pictures that you've provided are great. I love the look of that. My
It's all
personal
about
opinion.
preference. So if you can keep it, don't like it.
Let's discuss porches quickly. So Bruce likes this, so Bruce, you would say leave the 10-foot encroachment on the first level and the second level?
Yes.
Is that accurate? Ray, do you have a feeling on this?
What was the objection to the second layer of porch?
It essentially changes the feel of the street. So, the way the code was originally written, it seemed to intend to only have that first layer of porch, which means the main facade of the house would be set back 10 feet. So the bulk of the structure would be back the full setback, which is 25 feet, rather than being 15 feet from the road. So when people started adding the layers, the whole front facade of the house is there 15 feet from the street. So in essence, it changes the feel of the street.
As has been said already, times have changed. I have no objection to that.
Roger.
So let's remember that we're talking about sort of a subset of the item now. We're talking about setbacks and porches. So I would just want to remind you as you consider this, that you're thinking about the concept, well, if our goal is to make the setbacks perhaps wider, then perhaps you become more flexible on the porches. So you're taking something and you're giving something, and that's how you kind of try to address the community concerns.
Thank you.
It's a take and a take, because say I gotta give up my side back, or setback on the side, get the double porches in the front. I already have the right for the double porches, by the way it's written today.
It's not a porch. It's just that our code lacked a sufficient definition to keep people from finagling something.
Okay, so our code
The-
allows it today.
Yes, we were clarifying what the way it's currently applied in some instances.
It was sure clear to us 25 years what a porch was, but today, yeah.
These are balconies, to me, have always been balconies and are not porches. And I can tell you, when I drive down the street with a series of these, I have this feeling that there's this hulking big thing extending out toward the street. People complain to me that we have these, we call them McMansions. And one of the ways to keep these houses from looking so imposing is that they not come so far out toward the street. It was never the intent of the code in the first place. I'm not against balconies, I just don't think that they should be that close out.
Excuse me, the next thing you hear is that people say they don't like the big flat look of the house. It's too angular, it's too straight. So this breaks it up, so.
You can have it, you just have it further back.
Well, and also the porch could, the first story, the first living story would have the porch that could encroach. The second living story wouldn't. So that would change definition of the house. That would change the massing.
Or,
So that it would have
or the
50
second story would have the porch that sits back just slightly from the last one, which is this whole concept of the sunlight plane. And it runs this way.
Yeah.
And it runs this way, both. And when you look, I live on Astaire Boulevard. This will impact the redevelopment of my own piece of property and make it smaller. I don't mind. I'm saying if somebody owns a piece of property like that, I'm going to be limiting, I'm going to be tying my own hands. I know we're not supposed to get personal here, but it's just true. But when I drive down now and I see how imposing some of these structures are, not only are they so close to each other this way, but they're just so close to the boulevard because of how this is. If they just set the next story back a little bit, the next story back a little, you'd still have plenty of square footage. And the feeling that you're outdoors in Florida, which is the whole idea. We're on a barrier island in the outdoors, and these structures are so imposing that, it's exactly what the comp plan talked about. It was, what's the wording? I'm having a blank, but it's the relationship of people to the size of the structures. Sorry, what's the word?
It's a
Scale, thank you. Personal scale. And right now, the scale, we've lost what the whole concept in the comp plan was of this personal scale. If you're walking, now we have these great sidewalks to walk around on and all this kind of stuff, and you just feel overwhelmed. So I personally like the idea that, I like this redefinition. I like that if you're going to have the second story, you can have it, but it's going to be set back. You're just going to have to work your way back. Am I correct? Basically, you can your design, you'll just have to work back if you're gonna have these on the second or third
Well,
story.
and I think you're sort of moving into the next part of the discussion, which
Right.
has to do with the additional setbacks. So
Yes.
this was just the
initial,
discussion about
right.
the porch. But, yeah, the idea is
Yeah.
that, your first story can be at this box, and then your second story has to be in slightly. And then if you are allowed a third story, yeah,
Yes.
then you would have to be in more.
But I like what you've done here, as far
Sarah-
as this item.
Okay.
Sarah, I agree with Rexanne and Joanne. I also agree with Ray's comment and Bruce's comment that, these changes were essentially forced on by FEMA, but not to the extent that we have to abandon what we visualized as the Boulevard experience. And to me, what happens, I always, whenever I look at pictures like this, and I was looking at them online, I wish I was good at some sort of techie program where I could erase things and make it look different so I could more visually explain this. But like that first picture to me, the word home would not be associated with this structure, in my
Looks like an
opinion.
apartment.
And they do tend to look like apartments or condominiums or duplexes, and maybe perhaps they are. Anything but a single-family house is what the new structures are tending to look like. And I think, I like the new wordage also. I personally would allow the 10-foot encroachment for the base floor, but not for the second floor.
So for the first living?
For the first living level, yes, for the first, because the first floor, I mean, yeah, you can't do much there.
Yeah,
but-
can't do too much.
And I think that it would really dramatically impact, how the boulevard feels for a boulevard person. Now, but in my opinion, and of course I don't own one of these houses, nor do I live on the beachfront, but I would make the assumption that this space, this second floor space, would be much more beneficial or utilized on the back side of the house, on the beach side of the house, and the front side of the house. But regardless, I like the wording, and I only believe that the first floor should be what we're going to call the porch on the living level, not on the second level. I think it will change the architecture tremendously and make the houses not so homogeneous, and give a little more definition. Maybe they'll start to look like houses again.
How do you feel about the definitions, the porch definition, the balcony definition?
I think it's what we needed all along, that we needed that balcony definition. That's how we got into trouble, is
Yep.
we
Go
didn't
read
have
it again, hold on. What page is that?
11.
And,
I like it.
yes.
Although, don't these have roofs over them?
Yes, and those would not be considered balconies.
What are they then?
They are porches.
Those are both porches.
Except they're a double layer porch.
Okay.
You guys, could we just stop this for a second, because I think this is going to go on. Michelle just reminded me that Rob is here. Of course, I know he's here, because we were talking to him beforehand. The Boulevard project, you don't mind sitting and waiting for us to finish this, Rob? Okay, thank you. Go ahead. I just don't want you, of course you don't. It's nice and cool in here. You can read your emails. Okay. So, does everyone agree with the porch definition, balcony definition? Bruce, you probably don't, because you like it as it is.
That's correct.
Okay. And Ray?
I'm okay with it.
I like the fact that we finally did stoop. Stoop has been so controversial.
In Brooklyn.
Yeah, right? And Rexanne?
I like it.
Joanne?
Yes.
Okay.
So does a stoop have a roof?
Well, it's an entrance platform. It could have an overhang above it, but it doesn't have an overhang that's dependent upon it.
So these images and
Do
these,
we need to add that?
The images
Well, that would
you-
be, in my mind, that would be a separate feature potentially, because you can have a roof overhang up to 3 feet.
Okay. As long as it's explained, that's good.
Are all of these stoops in these photos?
It's a combination.
Which one isn't? Because to me, they all look the same.
I don't think that any of these are truly stoops. The stoop would be the front porch area. So like where somebody's trying to get onto their, so if you have like a side door,
Yep.
you don't really have that here. You know,
Okay.
up north where you'd have a side door, you'd have a little entrance area. So it's sort of the area that you stand outside of a door.
Okay. All right, so we've got porch and balconies. Can you go to the next thing?
Yes. So the next item is height.
Oh,
Well,
I'm,
we didn't
hold
do
on.
number
Oh,
one.
I apologize. Oh, side setbacks, yes. Oh, yeah, we,
I guess I need to even take you back. I didn't bring this up because I was trying not to get ahead of everybody, but E, essential services, toward the bottom of page 11. Essential services and essential service equipment shall not be required to meet the minimum setbacks.
yes, those are like utilities.
Air conditioners, for example. No.
essential
Okay, that was my
services are
question.
Mechanical
Okay.
equipment. Mechanical equipment is AC,
Oh.
generator, anything.
That has to meet the
associated with
setback.
house. Essential services, private.
What are they?
Essential services are gonna be more utility.
Oh, cable. FPL. Okay.
Yeah.
Lift station, stations, things of that nature that are.
Okay,
Yeah, so not belonging to the individual property owner, not something they installed, but something the utility installed.
I'm curious. Go ahead, Roxanne.
well, then it does move on to mechanical equipment, such as air conditioners may encroach up to 3 feet into the rear and water body setbacks, but must meet the same street and side setbacks as the building it serves. I know we had talked about trying to deal with mechanical equipment noise previously, and this doesn't seem to help the situation any, because there's no change that I see.
Yeah, these just have to do with the setbacks. There is we are looking into how we can do sound deadening. There aren't a lot of good options that we've found, options to put them on roofs, build alcoves for them, install sound deadening, features on the exterior of them. This is just to do with the setbacks, though. Actually, any sort of sound deadening equipment required, anything like that, would be a separate section of the code.
But if things are allowed to encroach,
But
then they're.
only in the rear.
It's actually one of the requests we get Jason Green Community Development, this is one of the requests we get all the time is trying to put the approach into that setback, not allow that. It's
Okay.
only the rear yard, obviously, in theory, bigger setback from a house, or a canal.
You're saying this is not the area that you can deal with that problem?
Well, it's not the area to deal with any sort of sound deadening, because I know that was an idea, that was something that was discussed at the joint session. We weren't aware that there were any concerns regarding the setback for mechanical equipment, because it's not allowed currently in that side yard setback.
And so many of the older structures do have them. I mean,
Yes.
they all,
Well, but
But if you think that, I mean, I think maybe to your point, that if you think that it should be set back additionally, or what the setback is reconsidered, I think dealing with, like Sarah said, the sound deadening or the loading, the amount of equipment you have in a building, we can handle in a different section.
okay.
But if you think 7.5 or 10 feet or whatever you end up discussing.
I just know if
setbacks,
something's
no.
farther away, you don't hear it as much, so
Correct.
I didn't know if there was any way we could assist with the problem partially here.
I think you want to carve out, or not if the rear yard backs up to another property, whether you want to allow this versus when it backs up to the canal.
I'm willing to take their word for it to think this is not the place to deal with it. I just wanted to bring it up to make sure we weren't missing it.
Where does it say that air not be in the side yard?
It says that if you read on packet page 11, on to 12, it says that mechanical equipment may encroach up to 3 feet into rear and water body setbacks, but must meet the same street and side setback as the building it serves. So That means it can't be forward of the house, it can't be within that 7.5 feet beside the house, it can be at the rear of the house. It could be, yes,
side.
if that was built in.
Problem is that the notches actually, in a way, make them
Probably
louder.
amplify it, yeah.
They act like a megaphone.
I would not want a notch.
The notch goes into the side of the garage.
I know, but like you said, it amplifies the
Yeah.
noise. It really shouldn't be.
We have this difficult balance of accessibility for maintenance.
Sure.
Which you've probably seen some ladders in this. Can't imagine trying to climb that and be a technician.
Some of our builders are actually designing them so that they can access them through second floor utility closets, so that they can walk out into that area, which I think is very smart, because otherwise, how do you maintain that system?
Yeah.
But it doesn't address the noise.
And have you had any conversations with builders as to the roof? Why are they opposed to that? Or does that just create all sorts of problems, or what's the story?
It's probably, it's the accessibility. IAC just went last week for the, thankfully they can walk to my house and get to it. I can't imagine.
So both of my stores in Times Square have roof air conditioning units. And is it a little more, what's really difficult is when you have to replace those units. It becomes very costly because they have to bring the crane in and everything else. But maintenance, you get to the roof.
One difference though is,
They are flat roofs, you're
I was
absolutely
gonna
right.
say, that's one of the main differences, if you'd like to continue to have architectural shapes on your
Yeah.
residential homes, putting equipment on top isn't always a good
I just
option.
know the first
You can
time
still have both.
that
Yeah.
noise of an air conditioner was brought up that I recall was when Summer Stockton was on the council, and she had a real issue with her neighbors. And remember that, Roxanne? They eventually mitigated that for them, I believe, but I never thought about it being a problem. Joanne?
The equipment, the reason we had that third story with, the elevator access and some other stuff initially, and instead people made that into living space. You can see it in the real estate ads, that they've made it into illegal living space. But part of that was supposed to be the elevator shaft, access to mechanical equipment, all that kind of thing. What's in the code right now is that third story above BFE, which was a limited square footage. So, that's an area that it could be as well. But I'm just wondering if it sits behind your house and not in the side setback, can't they just put a simple buffer wall on one side? Isn't there not still enough air circulation around the unit? It seems like the side facing your neighbor should have a little, people do it on their balconies all the time now. I see people filling in that side wall down the side. And I don't know if they're supposed to, but it seems like you could fill one side and still get, if the equipment's set properly, the proper air circulation.
That does seem like it would be an option that would work.
So I'm just wondering if that could be added in the code at some spot, or design standards in the code for those kinds of things. But anyway, thank you.
I think we can discuss the noise buffering and get some more experts that can understand that, and then ultimately, if we have to come back for the setback to balance both of those, that may be what we end up doing. But we just weren't addressing it here because we knew you wanted a greater setback and separation for the mechanical.
Let's go back to the side setback discussion you wanted to go back to, Sarah.
Okay, this was an item that was brought up. There was interest in increasing the 7.5-foot side setback to 10. There's definitely an interest on staff's part in eliminating the 10% setback for lots that are considered non-conforming, because RC lots can be down to 45 feet in width, whereas RS lots have to be much wider than that. So lots that are essentially the same can have very different setbacks. The RS lot being allowed to have a 5-foot setback, whereas the RC lot is required to have a 7.5-foot setback, just because one's called non-conforming and the other one's not. So it would be staff's desire to remove that non-conforming issue so that all setbacks for residential lots would be the same. And then there was an interest on council's and LPA's part to increase the setback from 7.5 to 10 on certain wider lots. Like I said at the beginning of the meeting, At the LPA hearings, there was a discussion about 55 feet being wide enough. Jason and I feel that maybe 65 feet might be a better width to start the 10-foot setback at, that 55 may not be quite wide enough to allow builders to design houses that people are trying to get right now. So in order to sort of accommodate some development that people have concerns about, increasing that width.
Joanne?
I mentioned this before, and I still have the same concern. And I was looking, especially, I mean, a lot of this is direct along the boulevard, but it's throughout the entire community, I recognize. But I looked to see how many properties really are less than 70 feet along the boulevard. And there's just a handful when you look at them. Some of them are residential multifamily in the area around Lazy Way, that area there. And there's give and take a few along the way. But this just doesn't work mathematically because you have then a lot at 60 feet gets a 45-foot structure, and a lot at 65 feet still only gets a 45-foot structure. It makes it very hard for those buildable. It seems to me that really, the 10 feet needs to start more at the standard size lot, which is the 70 feet or higher, and make that the start of the 10 feet. Because otherwise, it's a 55-foot lot gets a 40-foot structure, 60 to 65 still can only get 45, all the way up to 70, where it all of a sudden jumps. So it doesn't make sense mathematically. It's not fair to those property owners to not have some gradient scale of some sort, whether you can add 2.5 feet or what you do in that interim spectrum. So I personally think that where you have that side yard at 65 feet you stated, I think that it probably should say 70 feet.
And I'd say 60 feet. I think you may remember the pictures that I handed out at a prior meeting that showed the size of equipment that they're bringing in to do maintenance on these properties will not go down, especially you have a 7.5-foot setback, and then they plant plants in there. There's not room for these large mechanical things that they roll in to paint and wash windows and...
To the air conditioners?
Yes.
Well, they have smaller ones of those, they're just not being courteous to use them. And people have to complain if they're getting encroached upon. The equipment exists, but.
Ray? Bruce?
I like the 70 feet.
You like the 7.5 feet?
70 feet.
70 feet. I'm with Rick Zan here because I look at, I mean, I literally drive up and down the boulevard 2 or 3 times a day. And what I see happening, and I go to Naples quite regularly, I just
Don't want to look like Hickory Boulevard.
it gives me such heartache to think that Estero Boulevard becomes Hickory Boulevard. It gives me such heartache. I mean no disrespect to people or builders who are building these larger homes. I understand that that's where the market is and that's what they're going to build. I get it. But if you just experience passing, for example, just look in my neighborhood blocks at 3,000, 3,500, 4,000 block of Estero. When you hit one of the older homes that is set back tremendously, it's almost like you take a breath of air. It's just like, oh, there's some space here. And there's a new one going up just a couple of doors down from the Connecticut Street access that it's just right on top of the other houses. It's the 7.5 feet setback. And what that's going to do is cast the boulevard in shade, just like it does Hickory Boulevard, and it is smothering, in effect, the experience of driving down the boulevard and getting peeks at the water and having it be a place that even if you don't get to live on this glorious little piece of sand, you still get to experience it a bit. And I think we've got to protect that. I think it was a mistake of ours early on, and it's only because we did not anticipate at all these giant houses. We just didn't. I know I've said that a million times, but I'm with Roxanne. I would, and I don't even know that I would. I would at a minimum go to 60 because it just, to me, it's that important, and keeping any kind of view. And maybe at 60 we give them some bonus let them use the third floor space.
That's the next item.
Yeah.
So looking at, Jason has, and speaking with some developers, 45 feet width seems to be the magic number for the width of a house. In looking at the math, so if we made the cutoff for the 10-foot at 65, that means a 60-foot wide lot would have a 45-foot house, and then a 65-foot lot would also have a 45-foot wide house. So that sort of is the jumping point where the builders can still get the product that they say is in demand, and we get the increased setback. Would 65 be a reasonable width?
Well, if I may,
Roger's,
I
Roger's
just did,
recognized to be recognized.
oh, sorry, Roger.
Okay, I just wanted to make a point that these houses are 5,700 square feet.
Yeah.
And what you have to really ask yourselves, of these lot sizes, whether you're talking about 70, 60, or some other number, were they really designed to accommodate a structure of that massing or not?
Well, of course not.
So, I think that's, so when you start getting a line of them, you see the effect that some of you expressed concerns about. And I think there's a concept that just because you have a wide lot doesn't mean you build to the maximum extremes. Maybe it means that, hey, I get a little bit of a wider lot because I want to have a little space between myself and a neighbor.
I agree.
Yeah.
Joanne?
So I did a little math on my phone. And using the numbers that you have, like at the 7.5 and the 10, just the way they are, what happens with a 55-foot lot, you're taking 27% as a setback. At 60-foot, you're taking 25%. At a 65-foot lot, you're taking 31%. That's the lot that suffers. Then you go to 70-foot lot, and the 20-foot setback's 25%. And it's actually, what we're looking at is a number of 25%. Is that the number that we want? That's 12.5% on each side. Because when you look at it numerically, then as the lots get larger, it comes in that same. So it might be 12.5 feet on each side as the lots get larger. I'm wondering if the number we're looking at isn't really 25% overall.
As opposed to a specific foot
yes,
size.
that it's 12.5% on each side, because if you look numerically, that's what you're doing. Except if you have a 100-foot lot now, you've got a massive structure with only 10 feet. If it's 25% on 100 feet, you're taking 25 feet, which is 12.5 feet on each side. So you're just incrementally, everybody gets treated fairly at 25%.
That's very interesting, because did you see that, have you seen on the boulevard, the house, and I think it has a name, Rolling Waves or something, where it looks like two houses with a little walkway in the center, is for sale.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, what's gonna happen here? Now, I don't know if that's one lot or two. I hope it's one.
It's one developer, or not the developer. An architect has already been with me about renovating that. So there's no intention to knock it down at this point.
Marvelous.
Do you have any,
By the way, I went in that at the open house, it's a log home.
Is it really?
If you get a chance to go in the open house, it's a log
They
home
brought the
on
logs
the
in
inside.
from out
Sorry
of
to
state.
interrupt, it's fascinating.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
I've always
But anyway-
loved that property. To me, it was like, two families or a big family, had the parents over here, the children over here. I made a whole story about that property.
Can I ask you guys what you think about the concept of 25% then, as just across the board?
I've worked in communities where it is a percentage of the width of the lot. Each setback is, one of the communities I worked in up north, it was 15% of the lot width on both sides. So, and
Oh,
granted,
15
they
on
were.
each side, which
they
means
were-
30%.
They were larger lots. It was a more suburban style community. So it worked. But, it also depended on the zoning district. But, that is an option to look at percentages.
Ray, is that the question you wanted to ask?
question. Whether you had experience in those percentages.
But then what do you do with a pie-shaped lot?
The way you measure that is, well, it depends on the community. Sometimes it is the width at the setback, so at the 25-foot mark, how wide it is. Sometimes it's half of the distance from the front to the back, and then the width at that point.
What's ours?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
So I think we just measured the 7.5 at the the front setback, essentially.
Front setback.
Right, so that's, 7.5 comes in at that point. And it's.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we measure
I
our
think it's
setback
an
from.
interesting proposal that Joanne's
Yeah, I do
making,
too.
and I'd like to think about it some more.
Because
only
it's brand
thing-
new, I haven't had time to,
Well, thank you, but mathematically, I think it works. and I
Joanne,
think
how
visually it
wide
works.
is your lot?
Mine is at 65, and that's why I'm saying.
Yours is 65.
You know,
I wonder how wide
mathematically,
Bill
I
Beach's
lose 31% where nobody else is losing more than 25%. It's, you know, you have to adjust that somehow where it's fair, but
Bruce,
So-
you have something to add to that?
I would just say, possibly say 7.5 feet or 25%, whichever is.
oh, you've got to have a minimum on it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense so that you.
Yeah, somebody right on top.
It's
Yeah.
just too.
Part of the reason why. The
That's a very
downside to
good
that,
idea.
obviously, just is that, the downside to that, obviously, is you come up with odd setbacks. 8.2 or something like that. That's the only challenge on those, but
You know what?
Fairness is-
This may be too much to ask, and if it is, you just say so, but could you take one of these pictures, or maybe even a picture like on the road, and then, do you all have the ability to show us what it would look like? 7.5, 25, no, you don't have that tech savvy either.
I could have my graphics guy do it. It's a little expensive,
Okay, never
so
mind.
you decide.
That's all right.
I think
I
plan
get,
view-
I get the idea.
Yeah, plan view would not be hard to do. Yeah, but
overhead.
actually looking at the structure itself
Sure.
would be complicated.
Okay. Yeah, can you show us to that, or show us that on the 13th? Just, even if you just throw it at us as a little print, we could give a quick comment.
What percentage are you interested in?
Well, I like the 25% idea of Joanne's. It seems fair, and it does help us accomplish a greater setback. So on a, what's the average size lot on the boulevard, Joanne, do you know?
they were usually 70, 75. Most
Okay.
of them appear to be
So
70,
if there's
75.
70, that gives us an increase of what? It takes us from 7.5 to what? If we use the 25%, did you calculate that, Joanne? If
10
it's,
feet.
it takes it to 10 feet. Oh, yeah.
No,
No,
well,
it takes it to,
it's I think 10 feet more.
So a 75-foot lot would have 9.5-foot setback
On each side.
on each side.
On each side.
That's only, and
So you're almost to the 10, but it's also 9.375, which we can't do it to that deep.
almost
Yeah, so we
negligible.
would have to have, it would have to round
Round down to the nearest whole.
Round down
or round up, which, you
round
know,
down, up, whatever you want.
Round to the nearest whole number.
yeah.
There you go.
and if it was 30%, well, you know what, could you
Just show us a couple of options, and then we could comment on that on Thursday,
And
or
I
Friday.
think I think somebody mentioned about the 7.5, was that you,
Yeah.
Mr. Richard, this minimum?
Yes.
Minimum of
Because
7.5.
because the 50-foot lot
Yeah, let's
obviously
not
gets
get
you to
any
6
smaller.
feet,
Yeah.
so it goes the other way.
Right.
Yeah, minimum setback. But that way, the houses shrink and grow relative to the lot.
Okay, does that clarify that for you?
I think it does. Thank you.
So just to be clear, you want us to bring this back on Friday?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Wait a minute, are we talking about the rest of this stuff or not?
Yeah, we are. It's just that one
Okay, I
particular
just
issue.
thought maybe they were leaving it.
No, 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 no.
Will that be?
So, I mean, how are we gonna?
Ready to do that?
No, not to say if you can.
I'm a little nervous about Friday. Redrafting this by the end of today.
Oh, yeah.
I guess the agendas are due.
Oh, no, you can just bring it to us on that Friday. You don't have, it doesn't have to be included in the agenda.
I'll just put together some little pictures for you so you
Yeah,
see.
I mean, this
Okay.
kind is what you're talking about, right?
That's the kind I would not be able to do.
Okay, well, whatever.
But I
Just so
could,
it's a
we
little
could,
more of a
we could
visualization.
show you basically a lot, a typical lot, and then what the setbacks would be for that.
Right,
So we'll hold an agenda item, but it may be,
walk it on,
okay,
yeah.
thank you.
It'd be as my council member item, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that. All right, Sarah, what's next?
Okay, moving on to height. So there were, at the joint session, there was a discussion regarding, I am calling them I've labeled them as things so that it's easier to talk about them. So the carrots and sticks is, if you give us additional setbacks, you get additional height or additional stories. And then the light plane When it went to LPA, I brought them both options. They opted for the carrots and sticks. That's where they wanted to focus, because they felt like the light plane didn't give anything back, whereas the carrots and sticks method sort of, it was an exchange. You know, if the applicant wanted to have the box they already had, they could do that, but if they wanted additional height, or if they wanted additional stories, they bring in their setbacks on the first story, the second story, third story.
Okay, comments on this? Roxanne, do you want to start?
I like it,
You like the carrot and stick?
I like the carrot and stick approach.
Joanne?
I like it too, and the reason I like it is it will provide a variety of styles, because you still have the two options, as compared to now everything's going to look the same, but in a different way than they currently all still look the same. So I think it will provide more variety and accomplish the goal that we want, and make people feel like they have a choice. I like it.
What do you think, Ray?
I like it very much. It's a great way to go.
And Bruce?
I hate it. I hate the idea that we're going to require somebody to leave their ground floor open.
We're not requiring anybody to do it.
They
We-
get something
It's an
if they
option.
do. It's an option.
But to get that option, you have to leave your ground floor open.
Why do you hate that?
Well, if you drove through my neighborhood and looked at the people that have their ground floor open, you'd understand. In a couple of other neighborhoods as well, many neighborhoods as well. People put all kind of crap in there, and I don't find it appealing at all. Plus, my view would be that somebody is going to build a house with it open. The next guy is going to come in and says, you know what? I've got people coming into my garage area at night and sleeping there, and my wife comes in with the car, and she's afraid to get out of the car because she can't close the garage door or open it and drive in and know no one's in there, and I need to get this fixed for security purposes. And then somebody's going to say, well, you know, maybe that's okay, and we'll give you a variance to do that. I don't know. I just don't like the idea. You know, you go down to some of our beach accesses, and the sea grapes are growing, and the things going over the dune. You're not seeing the water from Estero Boulevard. And a lot of these older homes, you can't see around them either. And this is, to me, is a myth that this is going to open up and give you a great warm feeling. Joanne?
You know what, Bruce? I did not read that never being enclosed when I said I like it. I was thinking it never being utilized as in. I agree with you. You really don't want to see cars sitting out, and people are not going to utilize these options. People that have these size homes with this kind of money don't leave their cars out in the salt air. So people will not utilize the option. I think the problem we have is that we have these massive ground level things, and people are enclosing them and using them as living space. So to me, it's more that they are signing and saying it's not going to be living space. But I tend to agree with you, Bruce, that the enclosed part is probably not a fair or reasonable ask if you expect people to do the other part. And I just frankly misread that when I said I supported it. And the other thing I don't care for is the vegetation. I don't now. I like vegetation. I like native vegetation. I don't want to see vegetation controlled in the side yards. I don't want the structures gigantic, but I want to see a lot of vegetation. This is a tropical island, and the environment needs vegetation. We've got a lot more concrete than we have vegetation. So I have a little problem with the vegetation control, and I actually agree with Bruce about the being enclosed. Thank you for bringing that up, Bruce.
The enclosure is an option, so you can increase the side setback by 5 feet, or you can leave that first floor open. And we would, I mean, there's an option to change any of these things, to adjust any of these things. If there's a portion that you think should be allowed to be enclosed, you know, right now we have 300 square feet, because that's a FEMA standard. But if you...
It's a garage.
Yeah, but if you think that more space is okay, a percentage of the first floor, or you think that that's not workable at all, that's an option too. These are just options that we put out there because we're trying to find a way to give us something that it sounded like we wanted and give them, the applicant something that they're looking for, which is that additional story.
And to the food for thought, I'll go back to what Roger said earlier, is, put it in context, these are 2,500 square foot spaces, right? The footprint is about 2,000, 2,500 square feet. So I think there is potentially an in-between, but does it accomplish what you're trying to accomplish? You have to ask yourself that, right? If you allow a portion of that, say half, then we got to regulate which part of that is half. Is it front to back? Is it side to side? If you think that it opens up the airspace and the visibility.
So, one of my favorite parts of being a member of this council has always been the planning things. And I'm of the point of view that we don't think about specifics or particular properties or what's happening right now, because if we do that, then we limit our perspective, and instead think about what would we like to see, what would be our ideal scenario. And in my opinion, I'm just trying to think where that house is that recently got built. It's not on the beachfront, but it is on Estero Boulevard, and it's a typical elevated cottage. It's a brand new house, and the underneath is open. I could imagine if they had a beachfront lot, maybe they would have done that same thing and maybe gone another story or done something else if they had these options. I like having these options in place because it leaves the opportunity for someone to be a little more creative. And maybe, instead of Bruce's idea that, someone is fearful by not having closed-end space, maybe there are other people who are excited about having that open space because they gained something on the third floor, which they're going to utilize more, and that open space becomes play space for their children or whatever, which I hope the island populates a little more with. But I like all the options, personally. You don't have any consensus on this one?
Well, maybe there's additional options to add to that, to balance that. That feedback from you is helpful. Right now, what did you say, Sarah, it was 5 feet or enclosure?
Side
whatever.
setback increased by 5 feet or 300 square feet.
So we could think about
Enclosed.
adding that to diversify it, to your point, or changing that percentage.
Rex, are you leaning in to say something?
I just would, I believe that if we've got differences of opinion, you make compromises about them. I'm willing to do that. But I want to preserve the idea of options.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to keep with this. So if you guys can come up with something that's a compromise between some positions you've heard here today, I'm willing to go there. But
How would you guys feel about an impervious surface change? Maybe you can get that additional, so right now, the options are increase the side setback or don't enclose except for 300 square feet, or you can say that you won't increase your impervious surface on your site by more than this percentage. Right now, all residential lots are limited to 67%, and you do see that people are paving that full 67%.
and more.
And as much as they can
I've
get
seen
away
more
with.
than one house that's been built, it had the 67%, and 2 years later, they've come back and paved all the gravel areas.
We find that when we go to do the CO.
Yes.
So,
Sarah, that's an interesting
So-
prospect.
I mean, that would
I think
be-
it's too hard to enforce to give it as an option. People are going to abuse it.
What do you think, Sarah?
It may be difficult, but for large-scale projects, they'll be hard-pressed to be able to do a large-scale project without their neighbor saying, hey, you don't have a permit, or at least calling us and asking about it. Neighbors do keep an eye on each other around here.
Oh, we know.
So I think that especially if we did something like the declaration of land restriction, like we talked about doing with not enclosing more than 300 square feet, if we say this is on your land, when you buy this piece of property, it's a piece of paper that comes with it that says you're not going to increase your square footage over this. It's like declaration of covenants when you move into a condominium.
Right,
So that might be an option.
it's a good option.
Yeah, what do you say down there, naysayer?
Well, I'll give you my naysay on this, because I hate our code for the 67%. Make sure everybody hears me here. Because of the fact that people are digging ditches and ponds in their yards, and that passes for pervious area bonus, so you can do other stuff. And either the 67% is too restrictive, or our engineering options aren't clear to people. There's something wrong that we have people digging ditches and ponds in their front yard and side
That's a
yards
good
and
point.
backyards.
Well, so let's, can we, 7% is not entirely related.
The stormwater requirements, the pond requirements, it just happens to be that most people, when they build out to the 67%, it barely leaves enough room for them to provide the 1 inch of stormwater that they have to, the swales and the ponds. So it's not, they're not related, because they're not related as size-wise, other than they can't fit all that on the property. I think reducing the square footage would allow them more options. And always think about those swales last, and that's part of the problem that we're having. Instead of, they design the house, they design the pool, and they do all that, they pack it all in, and then they think about where to put the stormwater. I think the reduction would allow them more flexibility, actually, in providing that stormwater in different means. But the 67% doesn't equal a volume that then creates a swale. I just want to make sure that was clear. It just limits how much space they have to put the swales in.
Yeah, and like he said, if they decrease their impervious square footage, then they have more places that water can infiltrate.
Sure.
And it
Joanne?
doesn't have to be some weird swales over on the side that may affect a neighbor. You can do it in a different format.
On page 13, packet page 13, at the top, when you look at number C, it says D2, A, B, and C apply. I think things are renumbered because I don't, is it me or I don't see A, B, and C? I
We
only
don't
see
have D, we don't.
A,
that's
C,
right.
and D. So that's a little bit of my confusion here.
Changing my formatting.
So I just want to make sure that that gets corrected because that's throwing off my understanding of this. So is C actually B, D is, how are they really supposed to be? Or is that I not supposed to be there and that's B?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is,
It's B.
We'll have to double check that. I think what happens
Yeah.
with the word in minute track is it converts some of the.
Because I'm
quirks
trying
that
to
are
understand
sometimes.
which ones of these I'm
Yep.
saying are included.
Um,
It is supposed to be.
I actually think it's got as one, A, B, and C. Yeah.
Starts here. A, it's supposed to be. We'll clear that up.
We'll check the jump.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's one, A, B, and C. And then we added D. So, yeah,
So C is really B? Is that what are you saying that it's A?
no, one, if you go back to page 12,
Yes.
one, A, B, and C.
Oh, it's one, A, B, and C?
Yes.
Thank you, that's very different.
So I think it was probably originally called 2A, and then when I transferred it in, it decided it should be
Okay.
one because it
All
was the
right,
first one.
that's very different, thank you.
Yeah, so I apologize.
thanks for that clarification.
Yep.
Anybody else have any comments on this section? You feel like you have,
We didn't
no?
clear up about the
Yeah, I
vegetation.
know.
I mentioned about vegetation, nobody opined.
That was an item that was brought up by the LPA. They felt like if we were trying to increase the side yard setback, that we shouldn't be blocking visibility by installation of vegetation.
I think we need to expand our
concept of visibility in, to be more open space, as opposed to being able to see, because I know what you're saying, Bruce, that, you know, even a lot of the older houses, you don't necessarily have a view, but what you have a sense of is space, sky, trees, space, as opposed to a block.
Something's out there.
Exactly, something's out there.
So the two options would be to eliminate the vegetation things, or at least to make them more reasonable where people can have, and how are you gonna enforce it, like Rexanne said, anyway? But at least 6 feet so you have some privacy in your yard. You know, I think of what was that TV show, The Handyman or something, where the guy was always, or all you ever saw was his eyes, you never
So,
saw his whole
Joanne,
face.
What would be your change to item F in this discussion?
I probably would get rid of it.
Me too.
And the same with D. But if 3 people aren't gonna get rid of it, at least make it where people have privacy of 6 or 8 feet, not 4 feet.
Plant a lemon tree, it kind of starts at 4 feet after it gets big.
Nothing in Florida, this is a jungle we live in, nothing stays at 4 feet.
Roxanne?
You said you wanted to eliminate D as well?
The vegetation inside yards, once again,
That's F.
He's on one
on
D,
page 12, and then also on
Yeah.
F.
Oh, okay,
The
you're on
2D.
D on page 12.
D
Okay.
and F.
I'd go 6 feet. I'd leave it in.
Yeah, I'm all about the compromise idea.
So
I'll
would
go
you go
along with
to,
that.
would you go to 6, Roxanne?
Yeah.
And leave it in?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
You're never going to be able to
You know, I
enforce this.
never thought about that until now. I'm in my backyard a lot more. And that, and one whole side of my yard is common with another person's, sitting space too. And so I planted bleeding heart vine on the fence, which goes up 6 feet. What a difference it makes. And I get it.
We all love our neighbors, but we
Sure.
all.
Yeah, you don't want to
we
be sitting in the
all are
hot tub with
entitled-
somebody sitting next door.
We're entitled to privacy in our own homes.
I agree.
And I
Okay.
think we're.
I'm gonna
we're-
be
we're-
flexible on this.
We're trying to talk about design standards, but now we're traipsing on people's ability to have privacy where
Sure.
they live. And I think that's wrong. So, 6 feet is a minimum, 8 feet would be better, or get rid of it altogether, but.
So do you feel like you have consensus on this now, Sarah? Thank you.
The final item is how height is measured. Currently, we measure to the eave from base flood elevation plus 1 foot up to 3 feet, depending on how high they make that first floor, and then up to the eave. The idea is to include the roof in that calculation, so people aren't, building up to that maximum height and then piling a giant roof on top of it. So we recommended using the top of the flat roof, the midpoint of a typical gabled roof, and on the mansard roof, I think that there may be a better way to measure that because we don't see a lot of mansard roofs, but you actually can fit a story into that roof the way they're designed. So I may be looking at potentially changing that so it's maybe the midpoint of a mansard roof. How would you feel about that? So it'd be the midpoint of a gabled or mansard and then the top of the flat or Bermuda.
I have to tell you that something that's really made me think about this is, sorry to call him out, but is John Richard's new house on Crescent Street, which I suspect is going to be as high as Margaritaville. And we debated that height so much. That was such a significant portion of our discussion on that project. And if you remember, Dennis wasn't, ultimately he compromised, but even a foot made a big difference. And of course, we were talking about the view corridor from the bridge and adjacent properties and everything else. But if you look at it up and down the island, and especially on the side streets, I agree with what you've presented. I think it's important to unmask that a bit. Bruce, thoughts on this one?
I have a difficult time following all this, and what I'd like to see is some charts showing, here's the base flood, here's plus 3 feet, here I can go here, here, and here, and see different examples of what we're really trying to get to.
I did include in your packet, let me find the pages. You look
Because
at,
part of what this does is shrinks the potential height of ceilings in the living spaces, right?
no.
No?
Not, well, the LPA recommended an increase in the height from 25 feet to 35 feet, or 30 feet, which would make it commensurate with most of the surrounding communities, and most of the surrounding communities include the height of the roof within that. So if you're looking at 2 stories and you have 30 feet, so it's 2 living stories between the base flood and the roof, and you have 30 feet, and that includes half your roof, that's a lot of space. That's more than 10 feet per floor. Even if you have a 20-foot tall roof, that's 10 feet per floor, essentially. Granted, there's some space between the floors, but that is typically adequate space, and it is commensurate with most of the surrounding communities.
Yeah, that 5 feet added back in was essentially to offset the potential, what you're talking about, lowering of the interior ceilings.
If I have a three-story house, what's my ceiling height?
Well, the height by the zoning district would stay the same. You would, well, there's the options, obviously, to get that third story. But it's just you have to do the other setbacks or other things to get that within that same space. Well, actually, I think in the option two, you might get an extra 5 feet. But a lot of our heights.
I want to see examples
Okay.
that show the heights.
Right.
On that base, and if on that base plus 3, and then what it is, you know, what's the minimum and maximum that you can do?
Most of our heights allow more than sufficient room for the stories that are within it based on the feet.
That's your opinion of sufficient height. See, that's what I don't understand. I don't know what people are building today. Some of the houses I've gone into in open houses and stuff, they are
Right, and from a practical standpoint, 25 feet within, so what you see a lot is we're seeing a 12 to 14 foot first story and then maybe an 8 to 10 foot second story. They're 25 feet now.
I don't think anybody is building an 8-foot ceiling on a multi-million-dollar property.
You look at packet page 30. It has existing condition and then base height plus 5, which is where we're at. If you increase the height from 25 to 30, so, and it's changing the way it's measured. So you are slightly lower than the existing condition, which is you measure to the eave, but it's not a huge difference because we're giving them back that 5 feet. So that's a good example of what that would look like. And we used to.
I don't see numbers there. And is that 2 stories or 3? Living.
So if you look at the way this is designed, so look at the EC one on the side, where that door is, the bottom of the door, up to the eave of the roof, that's going to be 25 feet. So the numbers aren't in there, but that's that distance, 25 feet there.
From the ground to the eave.
No, from the
Bottom,
door.
front door.
So like the top of the stairs, you walk up the stairs, that first level is where you start measuring from.
From the stoop.
From the stoop, that's correct. So from that stoop to the eave, that's going to be 25 feet. And then if you look at the house next door to it, from the stoop to the middle of the roof, that's going to be 30 feet.
These are both 2-story houses, living space.
Yes, because it does not have the additional story built on. Some of the others show the 5 feet plus additional living space, or fourth story.
What's the height of the roof, the midpoint of the roof?
The midpoint of the roof on this one is 30 feet. So from that stoop to the midpoint of the roof is 30.
So what is it to the eave?
To the eave, that's not where we're measuring to, so I do
know that's
not
not
know.
what you're measuring to, but that's what I want to know. That's why I want to see the dimensions so I can calculate the ceiling size.
So part of the problem is we have existing plans we can bring to you, but they don't measure to those different points because they don't have to right now. But we can try to estimate and fill some of that in for you. So everybody measures to the bottom of the eave, but I would expect it somewhere in that 25,
If that's 25.
26
That's going to
to.
be,
Because when I look at that stoop there, that stoop is not living space.
that's the first living level.
Well, I don't think so, because it goes across the garage door.
Well,
I
so,
can bring.
That's
we can
just,
bring-
that's just, yeah.
We'll bring some examples.
Well,
Again,
that's why I said I want to see numbers.
and again, there's an architectural and a decision game with the site depending on the base flood elevation. So some people choose to elevate the first living floor, maximum, say, 3 feet above the base flood, or they do more, but then we measure the height from no more than 3 feet above base flood. So we've had several properties that were 5 or 6 feet above base flood, but then the height gets measured from the base flood plus 3. So in the middle of their stairs up. Others, they put the finished floor a foot above base flood, or the first. So it really depends on their choices of what they want to do.
I had a really good article. Oh, I've lost, but it talked about the government dictating how buildings look. And referenced a lot about Russia and how Stalin had buildings looked, and it was all built square blocks, gray, and, and I just have trouble with us being so dictatorial on how we're
Bruce,
trying
I'm
to
going
make
to tell you
things.
something. Maybe Ray will agree with me, or maybe he won't. Back in the day, architectural design standards were a huge topic of conversation. And we had, the rooms were packed with people talking, for or against, mostly against architectural design standards. When I think back on things that I would change that. I would have gone the extra mile, and included conversation about architectural design standards in our LDC and even in our comp plan, because then now, 25 years later, we wouldn't necessarily see what people are referring to as McMansions. We would see a more, I'm just going to say, beach-like environment in our architecture and the architecture of the island. And I'm not saying to go to the extreme of a Rosemary Beach or Celebration or any of these, ultra
Sunset,
planned.
Seaside,
Exactly.
those are all the ones we talked about
We
back
talked
then.
about all of
Those were
those.
held up as the example.
That's right, they were. And we just didn't want to be, we didn't want to impose that on people. As a matter of fact, we assumed that's what people would build. But we've gotten a totally contrary product. And I respect completely what you're saying, and, I had that experience when I visited Berlin once, and you saw East Berlin, West Berlin, the difference in the architecture, and I just always assumed they wanted to put as many people in the boxes as they possibly could, and so that's, hence formed the architecture. But I think that we would be remiss if we didn't say, you know what, here's ideally how we'd like, I know, I see your hand. Here's how we'd like this to look. Not necessarily, here's what Seal wants to build. Because my charge isn't to cover what Seal wants to build. My charge is to look at the island. I wish that we had been a little stronger on that. Ray, do you just want to comment on that?
Well,
Maybe you disagree with me.
no, I don't. I mean, that's the way all the planners presented it back then, That was our vision, that's what we had in mind, that's what we
Yeah.
wanted to maintain. We wanted to bring the building stock up from the 1940s and the 1950s into the 1990s and the 2000s, which has been accomplished or is being accomplished. But what's also happened in between then is we've had a few hurricanes, and people have come to the realization that these little cottages that are built now to withstand these storms, so they're building these homes like we built condominiums. They're built to last, and that's what we're seeing now.
Yeah.
So I don't think any one of us could have predicted back then, 25 years ago, but
Well, you
maybe.
know, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's just style, part of it's style.
Oh, sure.
Coastal contemporary, or whatever you want to call this, is what people want today. It's a style, and they used to have narrow ties and wide ties, and fortunately, I don't wear any tie, but, times change, views change.
Joanne?
Actually as a positive step, because that concept of design standards, we have commercial. And I always thought, oh, it's too bad we didn't do some residential to save it. But that's sort of what we're doing here.
Right.
The property values have become so expensive that people want to get every square foot that they can for their return on their investment or for utilization of the property. And what we're doing here now is providing them an option where they can still get the square footage, they'll be able to get the extra height, but we'll get a more variety of styles, still in the strength of what FEMA hopes, hurricane-proof and all that. So I think this is actually providing for some diversity of design standards and a recognition of the reality that you need to get your money out of the property that you invest in, whether it's your home or a rental or whatever. People want a good investment in the community. So I think this is a good compromise.
You can only do so much,
Yeah.
and we're trying.
Roxanne, you got any comments on this one?
I think enough has been said.
Okay.
Well, I just,
Good for you.
to that point, for the record, there's nothing from the European.
Was anything dealing with materials, colors, any of the design type elements that we're talking about, that has not been what's proposed?
Great, excellent.
Understanding.
Okay, so do we have consensus that the proposed discussion on height, how it's measured, Bruce would like to see further, more data on this? But does everybody kind of in concept agree with the proposal? Joanne?
Yes.
Roxanne?
Well, I guess the thing I would say is having attended the LPA meeting, I seem to remember that part of the discussion was that our current method was kind of confusing and not very clear.
Right.
So that this isn't done to hurt anyone, it's done to make it more clear so that we don't have all these discussions. I know when Margaritaville was done, how do you measure this? And nobody could even agree on how things were measured.
Right.
So we need to fix this to make it clear as to how it should be done. So I think that this is an improvement.
Clarity is always
Yes.
better. It's always better.
Okay, are you guys good with it?
And increase from 25 feet to 30 feet if the way the roof is, the height is measured is changed.
Yes.
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 Depending on the data. I want to see the data.
Yeah. You guys did a good job on this. You really did. Thank you.
Thank you.
And in case I don't tell you, thank you so much for everything you have done for us over the last years. It's been a real blessing to have both of you on the staff here. Tremendous blessing. You're so competent, and your kindness to our residents and our visitors does not go unnoticed. You're welcome. I'll write you a nice card that'll be a little more lengthy.
Well, we honestly appreciate that. There's a lot of communities that don't.
Talk.
Well, this is a
So, thank
dialogue
you.
group.
So, yes,
Yeah.
it can be challenging, but we appreciate it.
Yeah, the input is what we need,
Take
so thank you.
Okay, Mr. Murphy is requesting 5 minutes, so we're going to take a quick break.
Don't forget Rob is here.
Oh, how could I forget? Thank you for keeping me on task, Rex.
Well, I just feel sorry for
Thank you, everyone. We'll interrupt our agenda a bit, just to ask Rob Phelan to come up. Rob, thanks for being here as always. And does anybody have any questions for Rob on the Boulevard project? Roger, you're leaning in.
Yeah, I just want to state for the record that the county submitted a written report after the agenda was printed. It was distributed electronically to all members of council. It's available to clerk if anyone would like to see a copy of it through our public records. And Rob's here to provide you an opportunity to ask follow-up questions or other related questions to the project.
Go ahead, Rob. Anything new and interesting other than what we've got here?
I mean, things are moving along.
For sure.
So that's a good thing. That's why I walked in here with a smile on my face this morning. So also I want to thank each one of the members that are going off this year for all their support to the Estero Boulevard project, and I wish you well. And good luck in the endeavors that you undertake. So.
Rob, thank you for everything you've done to be so responsive and kind to the issues that have been raised by residents along the way. I know that's taken a little bit of patience, but your understanding about the impact of this project on our lives has really been greatly appreciated, tremendously. Are we still on track for next year's completion?
That's what we're working towards.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Joanne, questions?
Just a quick one. I see they're doing the sidewalk all the way to Lazy Way right now. Will that come all the way to Lazy Way and just sort of end there, or is it going to stop just short
So
of
the
that
current-
motel? I was just
The
looking.
current work activity that they're doing will probably bring the sidewalk up to Lazy Way by the motel there. They'll stop, then they're going to start work towards this, to the south. They're doing a little bit of prep work on the beach side, and then they'll be moving into doing the center turn lane, or the center storm drain construction south of Lazy Way to the Flamingo area.
Right. Is there a little gap there? Will you be, like if you left Lazy Way and you turned left to go south, let's say, will you be crossing a drain there? In other words, is there an actual drain in front of Lazy Way, or is that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because that's in a transition area,
Yeah.
so it's transitioning from the 50-foot right-of-way to the 65-foot right-of-way section there, and it's through two horizontal curves. We're continuing the slot drain to a location just south of Lazy Way, between Lazy Way and the Century 21 building, and then we've got a small taper which widens out to where we start the center pavers, and those pavers will continue on to Flamingo.
Thanks. People in that area have been wondering how that transition would go. Thank you. And really, it's been, you've been just wonderful to work with, and coming out and meeting with people and everything. I just can't say enough about your ability to communicate with the community throughout this project. It's appreciated, and it seems like things are speeding up, and that's appreciated too, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great.
I think I can speak on behalf of Rexanne and Bruce, and/or Bruce, when I say that when this is completed next year, that we'll have these, you prior dignitaries back in for the celebration.
I'm probably going to be busy,
The
but thanks.
completion, the completion celebration. No, you'll have to make that one. But I want to let you know that I met with Rob and Kay and the staff on Tuesday morning at their office up on
Lovers Lane there. And I met there for the St. Patrick's Day Parade. But I got to tell you that that's an impressive group of people.
Sure is.
That's their weekly staff meeting, and 25 of them around a table or whatever it was, and with the sheriffs and the firemen and everybody else there too. It was quite a group, and they cover everything to the nth degree. There's not much left to chance. So it was very professional, Rob, and I want to thank you for that, and wish you well with the rest of the project. Thank you.
Rex?
The thing I would report is that I'm receiving a lot fewer complaints than I have in the past, so that's a good sign. The one consistent complaint that I'm getting when I go into Publix, that's where everybody always grabs me, is there seem to be continuing issues with flaggers not being consistent. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. They jump right out in front of a car at the last minute to stop people, that kind of thing. So I don't know if the flaggers need to be, maybe we need to give them some brownies or something to bribe them to, pay attention.
We'll relay that.
Yeah, but it's just kind of an inconsistency with them.
Bruce, you have anything?
Yes, so where are the gas lines stopping?
Gas lines are stopping at Red Coconut.
Putting any dummies in for,
They have not opted to participate in our construction activities.
It's a shame.
Tico did not?
Tico. Yeah, they've done various surveys of, and I don't know, I don't know how they do their financials, so it may be that they don't see a potential market for.
Anything else, Bruce? Roger?
Madam Mayor, I know it's probably somewhere in your notes and some of the other counselors. We have approached the county about possibility of taking the responsibility for the landscaping element of the project over.
Yes.
We had preliminary conversations with them in regard to the amount of money that might be. I've mentioned to the county manager that, well, it's not just the initial cost of the landscaping, but what they would have spent for ongoing maintenance of that landscaping should also be part of the package. As well as giving the town some flexibility as to what plantings this or a future council might select. They said they were working with the county attorney to try to put some language together for us to see. I'm looking forward to seeing that language soon so that we can begin, as we start approaching the end of this project, and perhaps the widest part of the project in terms of potential plantings, to try to maintain that momentum.
Excellent.
So Rob, if you could follow up with that, we'd appreciate it.
Go ahead, Bruce. Bruce, you got something?
did we get the 90% plans for the south end?
The electronic version of the 90% plans were provided previously.
Who?
I believe I sent us several emails where they could download the files too. If the files haven't been downloaded, I can resend that link as well.
Can you send
I don't know.
I
Send them.
can
I don't remember.
re-forward the email, so that's not a problem.
Anything else from anyone? We pass our words on of thanks to all of your team, Rob. It's they've really been doing a great job, and we appreciate how it's like tricking along now. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Nice seeing you.
Okay, we'll move on to discuss street lighting update with Main Street Engineering. Roger?
Madam Mayor, members of council, I introduce you to William Pino. Town has hired Mr. Pino to assist us to try to reconcile the heating concerns of FDOT and FWC, as well as, of course, work with our partners on Estero Boulevard, Lee County, and try to advance a lighting solution that hits on all the points and checkpoints that this council has expressed. So please welcome Mr. Pino, and here's a short presentation.
Push the button.
Push which
Push
button?
the button.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Thank you. And again, my name is William Pino. I'm an engineer, mainly dedicate my life to lighting, the last 40. And I got retained by the city to, the word is not necessarily to solve this problem, but kind of to address it and come up with propositions. There's many, many ways of solving the problem. There's also many ways of not doing it, which is what we're trying to avoid. And this is going to be a very short presentation. I'm looking for as much feedback as possible. It is a fast project, something that I want to accomplish a solution or come up with something to you within the next 45 days at the most. So it's going to be something that we want to move fast. Basically, it has to do with the lighting, and forgive me if I'm going to give you my back, the lighting for Estero Boulevard. And That's the location map. Thank you. That's the location map. Pretty much that's the area that we're looking at, and we have the individual character areas of the township, and which means that and again, it's something that we'll have to discuss at one point or the other, but from an aesthetics point of view, and that's something that you may be interested on, that we may not want to have the same solution for all the areas. I mean, there's like a business area, there's an area that is more residential, there's area more condominiums. There's areas that have to do more with the beach and some that don't. So that's something that will have to be taken into consideration. Purpose of the study, quite simple, to increase nighttime visibility. That's the reason why you have, artificial lighting at night. Okay, reasons, safety, and again, I can do 5 pages, at a lower font of many reasons, mostly looking at safety, aesthetics, increase, the nighttime activities, property values. They do rise when you have a good illumination, for many reasons that we're not going to discuss right now. Community pride. Is good for business also. The problem here is we have 4 regulatory institutions: Florida Department of Transportation, Lee County, Town of Fort Myers Beach, and Fish and Wildlife, Florida Fish and Wildlife. Those 4 institutions per se have their regulations, and the problem is, or the task is to satisfy all of them. Florida Department of Transportation is simple, straightforward lighting requirements. They basically say 1-foot candle minimum average, you have to have an average to minimum ratio, maximum ratio. That's it. We satisfy that, is game. Lee County, basically easy to meet. There's more regulations than this, but in reality is the beach must not be directly or indirectly illuminated by newly installed or replaced point sources of light. We stay off the beach wherever we are close to the beach. It's as simple as that.
Mr. Pino, may I interrupt you
Yes.
for 1 second? Will you be able to email us this,
Oh,
this
absolutely.
presentation? Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Pino.
absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt
Yes.
you.
I think that
We have it.
Chelsea
have
will
it.
do it. Chelsea has it, so she's going to go ahead and do it.
Great, thank you.
I want to apologize that you didn't have this prior. I've been pretty much on the payroll for less than a week with the city, and this is a presentation that, after a lot of discussions and meeting with Roger also, and it was finalized kind of like close
That's
to
okay.
midnight last night, so
Thank
that
you.
was the reason. Town of Fort Myers has more regulations, but the bottom line, what we can add to the other ones is it adds glare consideration to the FDOT criteria, which is something that I welcome a lot. Dark skies and full cutoff, flat lens lights, maximum levels at property line, especially in the residential, and some height restrictions, which is something good. See? The problem is here. Fish and Wildlife.
Or the opportunity is there.
Well, the problem to meet, or let's say that the challenge is here, to meet Fish and Wildlife criteria for turtle issue. In the main problem or the main challenge is that the criteria, I need Chelsea's, okay. Here's the criteria, is keep it long as far as the wavelength. That's the type of illumination, the type of light source. And I'm not going to do a PhD dissertation here and get very technical, but the light spectrum goes, and if you ever see let's say the way that the light disperses, it
We've
goes
had-
from the
we've had,
different colors. So you have this. I
Yes,
don't
we,
wanna go.
we understand that.
But you wanna stay in the yellow, orange, reddish, wavelengths. That's what they want. That's why I say keep it long, keep it low, that you wanna keep the light source as low as possible, so you won't see it from the beach, it won't inflict the turtles, and then shield it. Shield it, in the sense that you won't be able to see from the beach. But from an engineering point of view, it's like it doesn't tell you, okay, use strictly this wavelength, use a height of whatever feet, and shield it like this. It doesn't tell you. So there's a little bit of compromise, and that's pretty much what I'm gonna have to get into. There's gonna be like a mediation, and this going to, okay. So the strategy is find solutions to satisfy the four institutions. Let's go one back. One back, Chelsea, please. Okay, we're off. Still get it. One back. Want to go to number 13. Thank you. Number one. Yep. Next. Okay, so the basic course of action is within the next 2 weeks, I'm going to have meetings with the 4 regulatory entities to establish the criteria. So that's the FDOT, Lee County, Fish and Wildlife in Tallahassee, in the township, which I'm getting all the feedback from Public Works, Chelsea, and from Roger. After 2 weeks.
Excuse me, I have a question there. Why do you don't understand what their criterias are today? I'm surprised.
Yes, we do. We understand the criteria. There was actually a very good study that the city commissioned to another engineering firm. In the study, talks about pretty much all the possible scenarios that are in the township. The problem, as I mentioned before, is we understand the criteria. Now, how do we put them together? Because some of them contradict each other. FDOT contradicts itself. The criteria of FDOT works against the criteria of Fish and Wildlife. So it's not that I'm going to get FDOT and Fish and Wildlife in the same room and come up, and I'm the mediator, but we're going to have to come up with a consensus between the two of them of how to solve the problem. As far as Fish and Wildlife is concerned, and it is very clearly in their policy, the best solution is no light. In other words, there's no substitute for absence of light as far as they're concerned. As far as the FDOT is concerned, we need to have this amount of light. In previous experiences, or previous jobs that I have done, one in the city of Boca Raton, for example, over in Isla Morada in Florida Keys, there had to be a compromise in the sense that the DOT allowed us certain flexibility of lowering some of the lighting levels that they require. In Fish and Wildlife, allowed, other conditions. It goes from extreme to extreme. I mean, there's some municipalities that are being asked, turn off the lights from May to October, for example. I'm just throwing it over there. There's other municipalities, and an example of that is Miami Beach, that it says, we're sorry. You're not going to get any yellow lights. You're not going to get any orange lights. It is going to be, what it is supposed to be in Miami Beach, and that's the way it was. That's the way it is. So there's where we have to come to a compromise. We understand it. We just need to implement and satisfy everybody.
Talked to FWC several told me that their number one criteria, though, is pedestrian safety. They want to protect the turtles, but they realize pedestrian safety is why you're having the lights. So, but they don't tell me how many candle power that is to protect.
Yes, which is,
Pedestrians.
which DOT does tell you. But anyway, continuing, so item number 2 on my scope will be to reach out to vendors, what's there in the industry that can be a solution. And I am emphasizing that I'm including Florida Power and Light and Duke Energy. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the slides. Summarize the proposals in a presentation to council in about 6 weeks, and then come up with some feedback from the council, and come up with a possible mock-ups and a pilot program from the different vendors, including Florida Power and Light and Duke. Final decision by council after they see what's out there. Fish and Wildlife loves when you do a mock-up and a pilot program because they go and see it. City of Hollywood is going through one right now that we're working on, installing approximately 500 feet of lighting on the beach. And Fish and Wildlife has actually gone already twice, and they've made some comments, and we're adjust the shield. We want to shield more this way. We want you to shield more here, come down 1 foot. I mean, circumstances like that. But,
Are you?
yes.
Okay, because obviously FP&L is extremely limited, and I
Yes,
have no idea what
yes,
Duke
and
offers.
we'll talk about that.
Mr. Pino, can you, Amy, just so you, I'm noticing that Bruce is one that keeps popping off. It's like it's having lag, just for you to check on that later. Go ahead, Mr. Pino.
Then final decision by council, and then final lighting study that is the one that is going to allow you to go to bid or go to secure the program. Chelsea, one more, the next one. Okay, so possible vendors, Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, private vendors. There's a couple of private vendors that have demonstrated interest. Sesco Lighting, another company, Illuminex, which I will be in contact with them. And I have a little, on the right-hand side, grants, and we'll talk about that. Florida Power and Light, like you said, Mr. Butcher, has a limited lighting program for what? For this particular application. Don't get me wrong. If you're building a roadway in the middle of the state, that's not an issue. But, you know, they have a limited lighting program for that. It's cost effective because it's, you know, you don't require to invest any money. Pretty much you're going to be paying at least a price per pole and unit. Medium to long-term response. I mean, don't expect a return call within 24 hours, but sometimes you can. But in general, the response in the way that the project is going to carry over is not something that in 3 months they're going to start an installation. Next one, please. Duke Energy, interesting, has entered into the same business as, in the state of Florida, as Florida Power and Light in the areas that they're not covering. So they're actually going, they're promoting in the entire state. Similar program. It is cost effective. You also pay, you know, per unit. It's a very extensive lighting program in the sense that they're not limited to a specific, say, availability of lights, a specific summary or catalog per se. They pretty much whatever As long as it's good quality, as long as it's feasible, and as long as they're willing to maintain it, they will definitely consider it. But their response time seems to be more aggressive than Florida Power and Light. I'm not saying they're better. I'm just saying it's an option, and it's something that we'll discuss. Next one, Chelsea, please. We mentioned the private vendors. Yes, they have, when it comes to private vendors, we have lots of options, and that's what we're going to be looking at. Just to let you know that, and always, if there will be unlimited funds, it will be so simple, but there are a lot of grants that you will be able to go after, or much the township can go after. These are some of the ones that are available right now. There's more. The federal government has a lot of other grants. These ones are faster. The federal government, you can start a grant and you'll probably get your money anywhere between 18 months to 3 years. But there's things that you can work on. These ones are very, very fast, especially the first one, the Florida Sea Turtle Grant Program, which is sponsored by the state. And I believe that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, any feedback, I welcome it very much. I have a meeting that I was just informed while I was sitting here that I'm going to be having a meeting, not next week, the week after, on Tuesday with Fish and Wildlife in Tallahassee. I had the opportunity to have a short discussion with Robert from Lee County and the things that we're going to be.
Thank you, Mr. Pino. Bruce, I'm going to start with you.
Answered all my questions. Thank you.
Ray, any comments?
No.
Roxanne?
I guess my question would be for Roger. I received an email that FWC had approved 10 different lights, and I forwarded it to you, Roger. I didn't want to forward it to the rest of the council because I didn't want to violate sunshine. Does this gentleman have that information?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry for it.
Yes,
Tim.
we forwarded, just so you know, Counselor, and the rest of the council, any relevant emails we received over the last couple of weeks on the subject, we forwarded Mr. Pino to bring him up to speed.
I just glanced through it, and unless Duke has subsidiaries that I don't know the names of, none of them are FPL or Duke that are approved fixtures. Synergy Lighting, Visionary Lighting.
I think the issue with Duke is, whereas FPL has their own catalog, Counselor, Duke works with these vendors, so you're sort of under the umbrella of Duke, but they use potentially these
So
vendors.
Duke might use Synergy as a
Correct.
vendor.
Duke is like Florida Power and Light. They're one of the largest utilities in the country.
I'm
mainly in
aware
the
of that, but
Carolinas. Yeah.
Florida Power and Light doesn't seem to be working with very many people, so if Duke is willing to, look at this, that would be a good thing.
Right.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks, Rex. Joanne?
First of all, thank you. I think that your presentation relieves a lot of the concerns, and making sure that we're getting a good overview all the way around. It's very appreciated. I'm just wondering, you mentioned some things about Boca Raton, Isla Morada, et cetera. I'm just wondering, Boca Raton, sorry. Have you worked with other communities such as ours where there's imperiled species and whatever, and have you been able to come to satisfactory
Yes.
resolution? Can you give me an example?
Well, one of them was Sombrero Beach in the Florida Keys. That's a difficult one because you have a direct beach exposure. It's very similar to what's going on right now in the city of Hollywood, because you have a road and then you have the beach next to it.
So the Hollywood project is A1A?
A1A.
Uh-huh, okay.
Yes. Also worked on City of Fort Lauderdale on A1A. The village of Key Biscayne also was one. That one was not that complicated because it was the main road that goes through the city and is not directly on the beach. You know, so that, there's a lot of similarities with your town, with,
Just to further answer the question, one of the things when we were looking at we should use, we didn't want someone who was sort of the Miami Beach consultant, like just jamming the white lights and too bad, or was 100% on the other side of the issue. We were looking for someone who had experience on both sides, so that as the recommendations come forth, you would get a balanced approach.
That's what we want.
And then finally, thank you for that response. And finally, I want to say thank you to Roger and the staff or whomever, whatever relationships or information went up bringing you to us. I'm very pleased to meet you and have you here.
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Mr. Pino, you mentioned Fort Lauderdale. Were you involved in that decision to make half of the turtle season had their the turtle-friendly lights, and then they switch over to the other lights during the other season?
I was, yes.
That's a very interesting one to me.
It is interesting, but basically, it was very complicated because it involved the design of a specific light fixture where it has two light sources inside. One is an amber light, and the other one is a white light per se. And during the season, the turtle season, you turn off the white. Well, you can't have both at the same time. You know, there's a relay that, you know, will not allow you to have both at the same on at the same time. And during the turtle season, manually, the Public Works Department turns off the white lights, turns on the amber lights.
Those are in use? They're in use now.
They're in use now.
So it's been designed, it's been manufactured, and it's been implemented. all
Correct.
three.
Yes, they do.
So all that work is done already?
That one's done.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a possibility, definitely in this particular case, to have, you know, at the end of the day, the orange light is not it's not attractive. I mean, everybody looks gray. I mean, there's no need to have colors anymore. Forget about the way you're going to pick your clothes. Everything looks gray, and you can't appreciate a lot of things.
Time of year, it doesn't matter.
So the white light is definitely preferred, but the turtles, you know, don't actually they like the white light. That's the main problem because they get attracted by the white light.
One thing in Fort Lauderdale, but I'm wondering, how did they consider the impact to crosswalks for safety? Was there a change in the lighting proposed for crosswalks in relation to the type of street lighting selected? And will you be able to relay that to us, because we're going to be working on our crosswalk lighting?
Okay. At the City of Hollywood, for example, that's a huge predicament for them. Again, safety. The safety is number one. In the safety of your constituents, I mean, that's the number one. They are using a supplemental, I'm going to call it beacon light, but it's not mounted on the ground, on the actual pathway of the crosswalk, that it blinks. It's not visible. It is an amber color. It's not visible from the beach because it's right at ground level, but it alerts, you know, the drivers that is a pathway. With the amber light, there is an issue with visibility of pedestrians. There's no question about it because everything looks gray, everything looks monochromatic, and then so you don't have a good ability of differentiating shapes. And somebody might be crossing the street and, you know, from a visible point of view, the eye is not going to be able to tell the difference whether somebody's going or not. I mean, in most cases, or in some cases. With the blinking lights, which is something that we can talk about it in the recommendations, that immediately tells, you know, any driver, that's a crosswalk. I got to be watching for it. So that's the way it was addressed. Unfortunately, the amber lights don't give you the security that you would like to have for the pedestrians.
So your recommendations as you move forward with the council will include some of that about the crosswalks then
Yes.
as well, design?
Yes.
And I'm
And-
wondering if, since it's Lee County's boulevard, if they will help with the crosswalk part of it, the crosswalks within their boulevard. That can be part of the financial discussion perhaps. Thank you.
You want to comment on that, Rob?
Rob Field, Lee County for the record again. Yeah, we've spoke about this before, and Lee County is always committed to providing the lighting on at the crosswalk locations. So, and part of what we've been, waiting for is some sort of cohesive plan to light the entire boulevard corridor. So yes, the Lee County will be participating. Activities we need to do are deemed appropriate at the crosswalks.
Thank you.
Rob and Mr. Pino, been trying for the life of me to remember where it was that I was. It might have been in California, where as people approached the crosswalk, the blinking light went, but as soon as they stepped into the crosswalk, another low light flooded the crosswalk. Sort of like you know how if you have solar lights on your house and you walk by it and it goes on?
Motion detector.
A motion detected light, and that's what happened. So blinking light was there, but then, sometimes people don't pay attention to those blinking lights. I've seen it happen a million times, but then when they actually entered the crosswalk, I'm guessing it was a motion detected light, just went on and at the street level, sort of lit that walkway.
Absolutely. The technology exists. It is very, very doable. Right now, most of those lights are solar, so the infrastructure is minimum. Probably, we won't get away with doing the suggestion that you just made, but on this particular blinking lights, they have, for example, imagine this, the sensor, you're right there on the sensor, then you get the yellow lights, the amber lights, and then as soon as you step into the crosswalk, they become red. And red blinking lights, they do stop traffic.
Sure.
That's no matter how you see it. Psychologically, I see red blinking lights and I'm stopping.
Red and blue really stick. See red.
One of the gentlemen that is running for the town council, so next time you're probably here, for sure you won't see Joanne and I. But one of the gentlemen that's running for the town council's name is Jim Adderholt. He worked for the Regulatory Commission in the state of Indiana, and he made an interesting comment at the last political forum about dealing directly with the FPL at a state level to try, and I don't want to misstate what he said, but that there may be other opportunities with FPL above our local level decision makers. How do you feel about that? And gosh, Jim, if you're listening, I hope that I didn't misrepresent what you said, but it was a very interesting comment to me that he made.
I don't know how they do it in the state of Indiana. I'm very familiar with Florida Department of Transportation policy when it comes to Florida Power and Light or the municipalities, because there's the utilities, other utilities like Duke, for example, in the northern part of the state. And as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of like everybody's on their own. I've never heard of that program, but I'll ask.
With any luck, he'll be sitting here at the soon, and you can have a conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh, you
Sorry
crossed
about
the
that,
line.
sorry, but you crossed the line.
Do not print
Unintentional.
that, Gary.
Don't print that, Gary. Hopefully you'll be able to have a conversation.
Yeah,
with us
no,
in the
absolutely.
future.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Thank you, my apologies, thank
No
you.
problem.
It was just so interesting when he made. So, all right. Any other questions for Mr. Pino?
If you want to see those bollard lights when you step out,
Yeah.
Bonita Springs.
Bonita Springs has them?
They don't go to yellow red, but they have the bollard set up that when you step through them, the little lights come.
Okay.
I believe.
41.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Pino?
I'm saying, I'm sure you'll be happy to work with any of the 7 candidates who the town elect to represent them, who will be sitting here. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pino, very much. Okay, thanks, Joanne, for the save. I didn't mean to do that. You know what I meant. He has that knowledge. What?
No.
So next item on the agenda is a discussion, continued discussion regarding places of worship and religious facilities. And back to the microphone are Jason and Sarah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this item is something that we have been asked to bring to you guys so that we can have more discussion about what the options are. At the last hearing, you asked if we would be able to look at some other localities and see how they handle it. We included Sarasota and Marathon. We also looked about Marco. They didn't have very comprehensive codes, it didn't seem, for these uses, so we included Marathon and Sarasota. We felt like they covered them fairly similar to a lot of other communities, but had a little bit more detail on their code. I really liked Sarasota's because in addition to having a zoning category that allows religious institutions as one of the uses, they also have a discussion about primary uses and accessory uses and how those are viewed. So there are a certain number of uses that are sort of included in the bundle of typical uses for a religious institution. And then if there are other additional accessory uses, they look at those in addition to see what the impacts would be. So it's all about the impacts of those additional uses. But they're granted a certain number of specific uses, like they're, have a Sunday school program and a worship service and caretakers residence and a convent. So they have specific things included. But then if you're going above and beyond that, what implications are there, excuse me, associated with that, and how will those be addressed?
So I think it's important to, basically the other communities, they kind of give some leeway to those other uses, I think, is being across the board. So I think daycare is a common one that's, for an example, I'll use that. So in some places, most places, daycares, they're all treated as their own uses, right? So they're not part of the house of worship or part of the religious institution. They are their own uses, but in a religious zoning district or a district that's dominated by the religious institutions, they may be an accessory use versus special exception use in another zone. That's where they give kind of the more freedom and leeway for the religious institution.
That's very helpful.
That's an approach. But again, they still use, each of those uses are independent. They're their own definition. They're their own use. They just are more flexible and allowed within the religious institution. So I think there's two ways to look at this. There's what to do to fix the code, I guess, obviously, for new development, if that's what we want to do. And also there's an opportunity for you to look at the existing houses of worship and religious sites and decide if you want to allow them to be recognized for what they have. I think that may be a separate conversation, but a key point to what this discussion.
Thank you.
I know that there was interest in the existing religious facilities on the island, how large their tracts of land were, what they were surrounded by. So I did do a quick look at that. So Chapel by the Sea, all of them are zoned institutional. Chapel by the Sea, which is right next to us, has residential surrounding except for on the side where City Hall is, and that's a 2.3 acre campus. St. Peter's is surrounded by residential, and it is a 2 acre campus. Beach Baptist is surrounded by residential. It's a 3.2 acre campus. St. Raphael is surrounded by residential, it's 1.5 acres. And then the large Catholic church, I do not know the name of it.
Church of the Ascension.
Okay, it is surrounded by residential and it's a 15-acre campus.
Thank you. Rexanne?
I want to make sure I'm understanding this. What I'm reading when I see this is that we came to you with the idea that we wanted to go from 2 categories to 1, and the Sarasota regulation seems to verify that that's what they have already done. Am I reading this correctly?
Yes, and
So
then they have the additional
we are going
uses.
down the right path. So I was really pleased to see that we weren't asking for something odd or unusual. We were going down the path that someone else had done. And I tended to agree with you that I found the Sarasota regulations to be a good starting point, and maybe that's where we can do something similar with adding our own things that fit our community.
Okay. Ray, any comments on this one?
I agree with Rexanne completely.
Bruce?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Joanne?
Yes, on that, do you want to go further than just that one
Sure.
point? I totally agree that we're going down the correct path, and I also agree that this concept of it's by district, we're a religious facility or whatever the category will become. We're a new one to come in, and we're, let's say, in a purely civic or some other zoning district, it might be different, but most of ours, all of them, have residential around them. And so I think that that's going to be the defining thing about special exceptions and accessory uses, because we do have residences around. And I think that that's probably our biggest concern, is how to make sure that the residences have the opportunity to opine and that we are able to define and buffer the impacts accordingly while promoting the good work that our religious facilities do.
Excellent. What else would you like to know from us on this, Sarah or Jason?
I think, conversation, I think we're looking at, I think to that last point about impacts such as light, at night, those types of things, where your feelings on that, the trigger, so to speak, a good site planning can overcome and mitigate a lot of things. So if they're within proximity of a residential district, if there's proposed impacts within 25 feet, 20 feet, what is there a threshold there that you're looking for? Not if it's just a simple come for you for approval, there's always those options too.
Comment on that?
I guess I'd just like to clarify that we're not going to do something that makes our current churches have to do a new lighting plan, or, because they're already here and they're existing.
Yeah, if they needed to do new lighting, if they came to us.
Right, if they were going to be redoing their
Yeah,
lighting.
Say, okay, this is the time to fix this.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was thinking more along the lines, they decided to do basketball recreation courts and hold leagues, and there was lighting for those that's adjacent to single-family homes. When do we do the review? When do you see that? What are those triggers?
I would see that coming as a case-by-case basis and coming to the council for approval personally. Joanne?
I agree. I think that these are going to be, special exception kinds of
Exactly.
opportunities. And, we may, the cost of special exceptions I know can be difficult, but I do see them as special exceptions. But also, I noticed in your request here, you had some specific questions, and number 3 sort of addresses that. That's on packet page 47. Should places of worship and religious facilities uses be evaluated based on impacts such as traffic, visual impacts, and noise? For example, should bus and RV storage require additional buffers, or on-site schools require traffic controls? And I would think that would be yes, because of the residential nature around them. I suspect that we have enough in our code right now anyway for buffering, but I do think that those should be done. And then there be limits, number 4, should there be limits or control on how much each of these uses are allowed on site, such as limiting to 10% or less? That's a difficult question. In all honesty, I don't fully understand the functioning of a church in terms of even what they're allowed to do from income and tax purposes and everything else, because I do think they have some limitations on them that I don't understand for sale of products and different things, but I do
Joanne,
think,
hold on, can I ask you a question? So are you saying that
There
this
should
would
be
somewhat be
some-
governed by what the criteria is for their church?
for churches
Yeah.
anyway, and things that I don't understand.
Yeah, me either.
But, and also these, we understand that the churches are doing things like farmers markets and things like that. So I think that there's some special event kinds of things also we need to consider. Rexanne, I know you were talking about looking at the special event ordinance in general.
We
and
have been working on that, but Sarah has been overwhelmed
I bet she has.
with other things.
But one of the points I want to make, for instance, like the farmers markets, a lot of times are 2 days now, and the special events permits, I don't think you can have them 2 days in a week. So when you, be cautious, since I know you're working on both of those, I know you'll make sure that the special event thing overlays well with these kinds of uses as well. So that's the only point I wanted to make, because that's outside the special exception thing. So at any rate, I do think that there need to be controls because of the residential around it, but this is a good direction, really good direction.
And I guess I would add control when there is residential next to it. Chapel by the Sea is right next door to Town Hall and puts up with the trucks going through
Sure.
and the trash and, so if it's residential, then we do want to be cognizant of that. But where churches are not right up against a house, they may be suffering the same.
And there's another unique opportunity, and that is many of our churches, not all of them, but many of them, have a lot of parking. And that parking, we know we don't have enough parking all the time. I know churches can use income or, there might be an opportunity for shared parking lots.
I
Within
was
the
talking to Arvid
code,
about this.
I mean, even the town hall, I don't know, I don't want to get into town stuff, and I won't still be on town council, but obviously there's a need for some conversation between the town hall and chapel as it is. But in all honesty, Baptist has got a lot of parking there, and I think that we ought to be thinking about parking, those large parking lot uses, and what else they can be used for and when, to the church's advantage, quite frankly, and the community's overall advantage.
My understanding is Chapel has not come about one of their particular lots due to the costs that would be involved.
So couldn't there be something encompassed here, and Joanne said she recognized how expensive special exceptions could be, that we facilitate these conversations by eliminating fees to the church for these particular conversations?
I think it's working those uses in. I mean, if you want to,
So
for
they have
example,
it by right?
if you have a religious institution site that's developed with parking,
Right.
we have this conversation with commercial all the time. Maybe they meet the landscape codes, maybe they meet all of that, and they want to do the parking. Is that a use that's permitted versus doing a special exception?
Like, look at Church of the Ascension has an enormous amount of parking. Ray, I don't know how many spaces are out there, but it's a lot. And that parking is utilized if there's a special event, on Sundays, on Saturdays, more so during season as to off-season. That's a great resource. Chapel by the Sea, I mean, all of the Beach Baptist Church, and they're right adjacent to a beach access.
I
That's a
think
really
the
interesting-
short answer to your question, Madam Mayor, is that we think that rather than create sort of a blanket use for them, our preference would be to let them come in and ask for uses and not charge them. So that way, there's a public hearing and everyone knows what's going on
Great.
relative to just have, whatever great idea they have tomorrow is automatically qualifies as a use.
I wasn't aware, Rexanne brought it to my attention, that, a lot of the parishes on this island are suffering financially. And, because we're so seasonal and costs of everything are increasing, especially even housing the pastors. And I think that anything that we can do to help them increase their availability of options, I think is doing a service to the community, because the churches are very important to all of us. And I think that'd be a great idea.
As long as we continue to respect the residential around it.
Absolutely.
I just want that, that we've
That
said
goes-
that
that
on the
goes- that
record,
goes
that we're
without
very
saying to me.
cognizant that there's
Yeah.
residential around it.
I mean, look, St. Raphael's, probably not a good idea for a parking lot exception, because people would be traipsing through that neighborhood, but Beach Baptist, Chapel by the Sea, the Methodist Church, all good examples.
I think St. Raphael, though, for instance, since you mentioned it, it works under this 34-20-52 parking where up to 75% of it can be on the grass. So, and that's a different situation. They're using grass parking lots as compared to the other situations where they actually have paved
Parking lots.
parking lots.
Let's go back to number one. Which additional uses may be compatible for by right places of worship or for a special exemption religious facilities? Does anybody have an additional use they might like to add to this for staff information? Rex?
Well, we had a list last time, and it's not in here this time, so I guess I'd like to, when coming up with this, I would look at the Sarasota one, but also make sure that we're not leaving out something that we already had. It's in our current.
I agree with that.
But I don't have it in front of me, so I can't list one.
Anybody?
I brought it, but it was actually pretty confusing conversation. So I think if you brought back something based on Sarasota like that as a start is probably the best.
Anyone disagree to that? Okay, we'll move on to question 2. Should places of worship by right and religious facilities, which are a special exception, be combined? Rex?
Well, that's the thing that I said when I first made my comments, that
Yeah.
Sarasota had already apparently done
Combined
that.
it.
So that, we're not the first one who thought that this might be a good idea to go down that road.
Anybody disagree with that? Okay,
And I think staff concurs with that, do you?
yeah,
Thank you.
yes. So we just talked about, or Joanne talked about, should places of worship and religious facilities uses be evaluated based upon impacts like traffic, visual impacts, and noise? Should bus and RV storage require additional buffers, or on-site schools require traffic controls? Joanne shared her opinions. Rexanne?
Yes, according to the circumstance.
Okay. Ray?
Yes.
Yeah. Bruce?
The example that I gave, the chapel is not next to a residential thing and is actually putting up with more noise coming from over here. So we shouldn't be limiting where they park their bus because on this side of the building, because they're actually putting up with many more trucks and equipment based on their neighbor, us.
Well, I get that, but I'm just trying to proclaim that in an ordinance.
Well, you say based on who is the neighbor.
Yes, who's buffering you?
Yes. If it's a residential house, then yes, buffering. If it's not a residential house, then, or if the houses are a great distance away for some reason or something, then you wouldn't have to have.
Based on the adjacent zoning or use.
Yes.
They have an on-site school, so do they need? Does a school mean, is that daycare, or is that?
That was the
Elementary
one
school.
specifically I had a question about. I think that could be very cumbersome.
Sunday school, does that count as a school?
Right. I think that's,
So
Sunday school
I-
does not count as a school.
So I think what we're trying to sort of draw a circle around is this idea that some of these uses may be perfectly fine on the campus depending on where they're situated on the campus.
correct.
And if you get into a situation where, well, we want to put it here because we have this existing building, it may require some additional things because of that than it might not otherwise require. And which brings me to my earlier statement that we want to have an easy path and one that hopefully doesn't cost a lot of money for them to come in and say, we want to do this, how can we accomplish it? But this council could hear that and say, okay, we're good with that, but let's put these safeguards in to make sure the community is protected as well.
All right, let's move on to number 4. Should there be limits or controls on how much each of these uses are allowed to use on site, such as limiting it to 10%? I tend to agree with Joanne's point of view that it just depends again on the particulars. Is there a better way for you to clarify for this for us? Give us.
So my idea is that it's a church, but then it really turns into a restaurant. Or, so it clearly isn't a subordinate use anymore.
Oh, okay.
And I think your protection against that is that tax laws keep them from making a profit. So they can't be running, if they're running a restaurant 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, the IRS is going to come in and clamp down on them. They're going to lose their exemption about property taxes. They're going to force them to pay income tax, et cetera, et cetera. So they're not going to go down that road in any likelihood.
Yeah, I got a great one for you. I'm trying to find the email, but I won't be able to. But where my son lives in Southern California, down at the end of the street, I'm going to call it the Church of Paradise. I can't remember the name of it. And they sell weed there.
They sell weed?
They sell weed, and California gives special tax breaks or something if you're selling medical marijuana or something. And it's called a church or something, and they're actually selling, it's a weed shop.
That's very interesting.
So,
We won't have that
just-
problem here on the beach, but that's very interesting.
Not yet.
Well, okay.
And that's why we're talking about the adjacent uses for any
Right,
uses
right.
in the religious facilities.
Ray, do you have anything on this?
No.
Just kind of agree with everybody else.
Still
Does
trying to
does
get
that
my head
clarify
around
for
the
you?
weed.
I think so.
Church
Yeah,
of
this
Weed.
gives us something to work with and get started in a direction.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jason. Anything else on this for you guys? Anybody else have anything to add to this?
I just have one last thing.
Yes, Rich?
It's Redondo.
The list we were working on at the prior meeting, that if there's a particular use that's listed there that you feel strongly should be incorporated as a vested use, to just, if you just send us an email and let us know so that we can, if there's something that we didn't quite finish off at that last meeting, if there's another use that you feel strongly about, to please let us know so we can get it incorporated in the next round of discussion of this.
Thank you, Roger. Next item on the agenda is to discuss evaluation and performance of the town manager over the past year and prioritize and establish mutually developed and accepted goals for the next 12 months. We need a timeline for review, possible pay increases, and setting goal for the next year. Mr. Hernstedt, you have any comments on this?
There may be.
Ray, you want to start with this?
Well, I mean, we do this, you have to bring me back up to speed, because I've been out of it for a little while. Is this an annual review that the town
It's
manager?
the town manager goes through an annual review, and during that annual review, usually it's a one-on-one review with the town manager in private, and then at a public meeting, decisions are made with the council as
Okay.
to the rest of the details.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
And if you don't mind my saying, on our green sheet here, you can see the actual, this is part of
His contract.
Contract. So
Okay.
that gives specifics within his contract. just
Okay,
to-
so it's just a matter of establishing the timeline and the possible pay increases. Well, then,
Well, and I think the thing that's important about it coming on before us now is that and I'm not saying this to insult Bruce, but it's possible we could have 3 brand-new people who have never worked with Roger here next month. So it would be unfair to evaluate him with you and I, Ray.
yeah.
So we really need to get this done soon.
Well, you know what?
Yes,
At the
As
next
long as it's
meeting.
done
Yeah.
properly, advertised that we're going to do it, and everybody knows it's coming, so there's no problems like supposedly there were last time. So that's fine.
Here's
Go,
my
move right ahead with it.
Everyone get your evaluation form, the one we had last time, or whatever you want to use.
There wasn't one used last time, was there?
Yes, there was.
Yeah, there was. I had one.
Then we didn't get it.
Well, we can get it.
Michelle, you'll get it to us all, whatever they consider that evaluation form to be?
I was unable to locate what was used last.
Well, we can get them from my file, because they're the ones that were submitted last year are in my file.
Yeah.
And Amy actually checked with Amanda upstairs, and there was nothing in your file.
Well, I know some people had them, maybe they didn't turn them in, I don't know, but we'll find it.
This shouldn't be
this shouldn't be too difficult. I'm sure there's a standard form that we can utilize, and if we could get that so that each council member could make an appointment with Mr. Hernstat next week to sit down with him, that would be great. Yes, go ahead.
I know we've used, it was cursory in the past, and I do think that it's important that we note that, within the town charter itself, it has duties that are clearly listed, an entire list of duties for the town manager, and then the town manager within the budget. And I think that, in all honesty, whatever review we do, town councilors should always keep in mind that there's a basis in the charter for review. I can just say, he holds up fabulously to it, so this is not a big surprise. But I think it's imperative that part of evaluation of any town manager does relate to the charter, that it's just not, hey, I like this guy. No, I'm just saying. So I hope that everybody will kind of use that. We also talked about our strategic plan. I think that as a town council, they should be evaluating, just from my own experience now, having been through 3 years of this, I think that an objective basis is always good. And then there's a management of utilities, which are CIP, all of the facilities of the town that sort of isn't mentioned in either of these. But I think it's healthy to understand that the town manager is not evaluated on, hey, I like this
him,
guy.
I don't like him.
I do happen to like him. I think he's great, whatever, but I also like him on a very objective point of view, looking at the things that we ought to, which is the strategic plan, the expectations of our charter, and then the functioning of all of the capital facilities that belong to the people of this town.
What I'd like to see happen is the same thing that happened with our applications for filling in town managers, town attorney. I'd like there to be an actual form with process that is attached to our policies and procedures manual, Michelle. Maybe we could even adopt that on the 13th. That should include, Joanne, you obviously made copies of that.
I didn't make copies, but I did print out the stuff, and I did throw it into a chart form. If you have
I knew you
the
would.
charter direction, that's what the charter says.
So I would like you to give that to Michelle and let that accompany the form, and maybe we could memorialize this for our policies and procedures manual on the 13th. There was a lot of scrutiny in the past, and I think that we could avoid that if everybody knows, here's the form, this is what we're evaluating the town manager on, here out. Some other future council decides they want to alter that in some way, they could have at it, but at least it's all put into place, and we're remiss in not having done it sooner, but here we are.
So,
Default, you've got a look of a question on your face. What is it, Michelle? Hold on, what's Michelle's question?
I'm just trying to understand what form.
A basic town manager evaluation criteria form. Pick it. I don't care what that form looks like.
I'm glad to help with it. But before we leave the room, or the topic, do you agree that on those areas I mentioned, charter duties, specifically as stated in the charter, something with regard to goals and objectives of the strategic plan, and then management of utilities and properties, the capital plan, that really isn't within the budget listed in the charter? So would you agree with those three, number one? And also, in addition to that, would you add something as a town council? And I would also add the town manager, who's been a town manager for a variety of cities for many years, what he thinks of that, what he might add. So would you add anything else?
What I have found over the past is that those, what I'm going to call a generic form, oftentimes includes, how does he treat the other employees? How does, we really don't have experience with that unless, you say to me, blah, blah, blah.
Which I never would do.
I know.
Communication skills, so forth.
Yeah. Does anybody disagree with what Joanne is commenting on?
No.
I don't either. You guys? No. Okay, so Joanne, Mr. Herron?
Yeah, the question, would you like for it to be a discussion item and then, vote and direct, and then I can make an amendment, to the existing contract. Generally, that's the way that it's done, and, would second, third amendment to whatever we're at, and then bring that as a resolution at the next meeting, memorializing your direction.
Yes.
Okay.
No. Establishing an evaluation form in our policies and procedures manual doesn't go into his contract.
No.
That's not what you're
Once-
saying.
Okay, well,
based
then I'm
upon-
not following.
Based upon the evaluation, you discussion presumptively a decision to either give Mr. Hernstadt a raise or
I
not.
thought his raises had already been built in. It was a multi-year contract.
It was proposed, but I wasn't there, but
Well, see, we don't have that in front of us.
You might want to include that in the package too, a copy of the contract.
Yeah, and also I think we need to make sure that the item as listed on the agenda states these issues, that we are going to discuss a possible pay increase. It has to be in there on the agenda so people understand
to me,
it.
it's 3 steps. You evaluating, you review for compensation, and then you establish goals and priorities for the next year that then becomes the basis for the evaluation the following year. And to me, the new town council should be the ones setting the new goals and objectives and priorities. This town council does the evaluation and the review for this period of time.
Okay, good.
And
I agree with you, Bruce.
to my point, then, if there's a pay increase, then we would bring back at the next meeting with a resolution and amendment to the contract.
Fortunately, the next meeting will have different council members.
No, the 13th.
Are you talking about the 13th, or are you talking about, we discuss this on the 13th and then at the next meeting?
How would you like us to handle it?
All on the 13th.
All on the 13th.
Okay.
Except for this establishment
Except
of
for the
goals
goals
for
and
the next year.
procedures. That should be, that should be left up to the next group. Although I will share with you personally things that I think are important for the upcoming years. You can count on that, Roger.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
I know it. All right, does anybody, yes,
I think for some clarification.
yes, ma'am.
You are asking that an evaluation form be sent to the council prior to the 13th?
That was going to be my question, too.
I
I,
could put this together
Yes.
pretty quick.
And send it out, it's going to be very objective, just on what we listed there. And then we can froof it up a little bit at that meeting and correct it before it's
But if we're going to meet
formalized.
with Roger, we need to have it in our hands
Yes,
before
but
we meet with him.
I can get it out, we can have
So,
it by the end of the day
does
today or
anybody
tomorrow.
object to Joanne working with Michelle to accomplish this and expeditiously? Anybody object? Thank you, Joanne, for your time. Great. Go, Michelle. You
Thank
gotta
you.
help her. All right, let's move on to agenda management. I have to tell you, I remember back in 2000, what year was it? 14, I guess? Yeah, 14. And Rex, you probably remember this too. I remember going to Michelle and saying, "What the heck is this list?" And she said, "Oh, I hope you're going to be able to weed through this because it was very kind of convoluted at the time." I'm super excited to see that we've essentially accomplished everything that we have added to agenda management over the years, and that we're leaving a few biggies for the next people. But I'm sure whomever is elected will handle that competently. The meeting of the 13th looks kind of big. Maybe not. And then, does anybody have anything that they'd like to add to the meeting of the 13th? We're adding the evaluation of the town manager. Is there anything else somebody feels,
There's only one,
what is it, Joanne?
and
What is it, Joanne? What is it, Joanne?
I think it's simple, but maybe you disagree. We've had a question and we didn't address it. Individuals that have the right to rent for a week in the weekly zones as compared to a month that are not condos, asked a question of us. Does that mean you can rent for 3 days as long as you only do it every week? 3 days out of 7. And when I look at our code, which is 342391, it says may be rented for periods of 1 week or longer. I don't see that there's any misinterpretation to be made of that code. You know, less than 1 week is hotels, motels, and bed and breakfast. Does the council feel that we need to state on the record that that's what that says and just put that to bed?
Yes, I do. I do think we need to. Does anybody else agree?
Yes.
With clarification or agree with the statement?
Agree with clarification, because I don't necessarily agree that,
I agree with you.
yeah. I just will use the weekly rental that is next door to my house. There are often times where someone comes in for 3 days. Now, they have rented that whole week, but they just come in for 3 days. And then it's vacant for the other 4. Nobody else comes in, the week is blocked off. I've had a long conversation with the property owner about this.
And did they pay for the whole week, but
Yeah.
only show for 3?
Yeah. The week is blocked off. So it's like, you know, a family comes in, they're here for a few days, they go to Disney for the rest of the time, or they go and then maybe they come back for a day. I don't know. I think there's some flexibility there.
I think the wording's pretty specific. Okay, so do we want to talk about this or not? Or would you rather not?
Roxanne?
I was under the impression that staff was rewording it and just hadn't gotten back to us yet.
Well, you know what? Let's, could we talk about this, Roger, on the 13th, briefly ask Sarah and Jason to kind of give us an update where they are with this? We could share with them our wisdom, which I think might be very divided. I don't know, maybe not.
I actually thought we were going to have a meeting with the realtors at some point in time too, and that was one of the items to discuss.
It was.
Well, then it's big and maybe we don't.
I really do think, with all due respect to all of you,
We
that
leave it to the next guys.
I think it's going to fall, because even if you guys came up with a consensus, when it comes back in ordinance form, it's still going to be in front of the new council.
So we can share our feelings with the next council members.
That's
Okay.
fine with me.
Yep.
That's it for me.
Anybody else want to add, Rex?
You were saying anything to be added to the 13th. I have a couple of things that I think go beyond the 13th that I'd like to add.
Okay, go ahead.
It was brought up today, the issue of mechanical noise. I understand the staff is working on it, but I don't see that it's on our agenda management, and so things tend to fall between the cracks if they're not on there. So I'd like to see mechanical noise,
Okay.
air conditioners, pool pumps, et cetera.
I'll agree with you to put that on.
That's my number one. Number two,
Councilmember, did you want a date assigned to that or just add it to the
no,
list?
just add it, to be decided when
Got it.
staff gets done with it,
Thank
whatever.
you, Michelle.
Keep it in print.
Yeah. Quality Cities Magazine that we get as a result of being members of the Florida League of Cities had an article which alarmed me, and maybe I shouldn't be alarmed. The article was entitled "The New World of 5G," and it seems to indicate that 5G is coming. The state has already allowed it to come and severely limited what we as localities can do about it, that they're coming into cities and putting poles in front of artworks in the way of crosswalks.
Without asking?
They don't have to ask, apparently.
I haven't read that.
There are some limited things that FLC recommends that we can do, draft an ordinance with aesthetic standards that 5G companies might adhere to, that they have to match existing poles, that their equipment must be concealed.
But Rex, would they be required to do that if we had an ordinance?
This is not a legal treatise. It's just an article that says, hey,
Treatise.
this might be a problem. Cities that haven't jumped on it are having detrimental effects.
John, Roger, you have any comments?
Well, I'll say this, that we've had a couple of permit applications come in. We review the permit applications. In one case, we asked the company to make a slight adjustment, and they did. We didn't get to the point of, hard no versus a yes. It was just really more of, well, if you moved it over here, it'd be a little bit better, and they concurred. So, we haven't perhaps had the problems that perhaps are occurring in other places, but That being said, we can definitely put this on for further discussion by the council to see if they feel that there's a need to be proactive about it.
Excellent. Okay,
And I
so
think it's kind of in John's
wheelhouse.
wheelhouse that he needs to come
Yeah,
back to us and say, yeah, you might want to do an ordinance.
I'll get a copy of the article from Ms. Hosfrost, but yes, the state has preempted it, as they are doing with many things, and making it extremely difficult for, what we already know. We may be able to regulate it, but we can't say no to it.
Just to give you a quote here, nearby in the Miami district of Miami-Dade County, 5G installation came as a sudden and unwelcome surprise, said Miami-Dade Commissioner Elaine Higgins. We began to see holes in our sidewalks literally everywhere, up in front of art and public places, in front of historic structures, the entrance to an apartment building. The quality of the workmanship was just horrific. They just came in and
How they make sure that they repair things, we certainly can, and frankly, so can the city of Miami, and regulate those types of things.
But they didn't have an ordinance on the books at the time that 5G hit them, so I guess what I'm saying is
I think it's
We will
great
look
you're
at
bringing it forward, Rex. Anything
We will
else?
report to you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Mr. Murphy, anything?
Well, that's just, that's why it's in that magazine, because it's, that's the bailiwick of the Florida League of Cities, and that's just one more example of how they're trampling home rule. I mean, there's been so many examples of it this year, it's pathetic. I mean, here we are, the level that gets the most things done for its citizens. God knows they're not doing it in Washington, and very little in Tallahassee, but they keep preempting us here on the local level of things that we can actually get done. So,
You know what, Ray? I would encourage you and Rexanne to ask the candidates who are running for the state legislature and the Senate to come here and ask them that one question: where do you stand on this?
Well, they often say they stand with us now, but after they get elected.
Just put them on the record. Put them on the record.
Yes.
Okay, Ray, anything to add?
no thanks.
Bruce, anything to add? Nope. Okay. Thank you all for our last work session together. It's been a pleasure. It is 11:42 and we stand adjourned.